Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, diving back into this USC program, heading into spring practice, fall camp in the 2024 season. Last week, we took a deep dive into that USC offensive line. This week, we got the defensive line. And Dill, next week's episode might go 30 minutes as we break down the offensive skill position. But this defensive line, want to talk about two things. One, what we saw from the 2023 season, talk about some things they obviously have to clean up, some players that we thought stood out. And then what is this USC defensive line going to look like in 2024? Obviously, if I'm a USC fan, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about personnel and players that we thought maybe popped on film that might take a step in 2024. But if you're most excited about Eric Henderson, Lynn coming into this defense, right? This was a defense that was poorly coached, especially along the line of scrimmage. Eric Henderson, Lynn going to clean that up. Really excited to get into this one. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys. And as usual, a shout out to the USC fans. I mean, this is a program the boys love talking about, but the amount of support you guys show, it means the world. All the fight-ons in the comments section. Can't thank you guys enough for all the support. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And more importantly, the best part about doing these deep dives is talking ball with you guys, learning from you guys in the comments section. Would love to hear what you guys are thinking about this defensive line group as well. And Dale, I'm going to give you the T-box here. Let's start with what we saw from this USC defensive line in 2023.
I mean, I think the fundamental issue is it's not a good stat to be like that bad as they were in the run, but also have that many TFLs and that many like playmaking plays from that defensive line.
Top 25 in the country in tackles for loss per game.
So you can't have that and then have games like Washington where you're giving up 10 yards a pop. It feels like it just like that at the end of the day, it tells me the coaching wasn't nearly good enough. I think some of the players don't have enough discipline, frankly, to sit in their gaps and have that type of integrity. So I think that just needs to get overhauled. At the end of the day, the players are going to be what they are. I think it was a solid, talented unit last year. I think they have a fair amount of guys who can play coming in this year, but they need to just clean up the stuff that was an issue, and that kind of starts and stops with being accountable for what you're supposed to do each play.
Yeah, I agree. And I was prepping this last night, watching some of the USC games back there. Washington was one of the games that I watched, and I mean, it was frustrating. And I had trouble sleeping. I was laying my head on the pillow, just trying to think about like what was being discussed in that defensive line meeting room throughout the week, where you just have guys. And I think you made the best analogy. We were talking about this before we recorded. It seems like that defensive line last year just played as individuals, as opposed to like a group, a cohesive group that has certain responsibilities and gaps that they're accounted for, right? It was guys just shooting gaps, getting out of gaps, and that's what you saw. Like, yes, you created some negative plays, and you want to see that kind of continue, but you can't have those plays where you're shooting gaps, completely leaving a hole kind of unaccounted for, and then giving up those 20-plus yard runs. And that you saw that.
Not being accountable, like if you need to take a double team on, you need to take it on. It's like you look at a guy like Byron Murphy from Texas, makes a ton of plays, but when he needs to sit on a double team, he'll do what he needs to do to sit on a double team. He'll get low. He'll cut guys if he needs to. He does what he needs to do his job. And frankly, USC needs more of that. They need more. If you're going to take a double team on, you need to take it on hard. You can't be back there. Because again, the linebackers took a beating, and I don't think they played great football by any stretch of the imagination, but it's really hard to play good linebacker play when your defensive linemen have no interest in taking on double teams and they're 5 yards in the backfield.
I agree. And some of the things that back that up, I was looking at some average depth of tackle, and that's something we look at in terms of like figuring out where these defensive linemen are making their plays. I mean, Jack Sullivan, 3.8 yards down the field. Tyrone Taleni, 3.2 yards down the field. Benton, 3.5 yards down the field. That's telling me these defensive linemen are getting moved off the line of scrimmage, not making their plays at or behind the line of scrimmage, and that's a massive problem. And talking about we talked about the coaching, and one other aspect and note to have on the coaching and the personnel decisions I thought was relatively frustrating. I mean, you saw a guy like Kyan Barrs just not get enough opportunity. Anthony Lucas didn't get enough opportunity. The choices of who was getting the playing time and the snaps and what positions they were in, I didn't exactly love either. But this USC defensive line needs to put on some weight. And we talk about a guy like Elijah Hughes, who, I mean, showed some good things against Louisville. He's got to put on weight. You have to get this defensive line stronger at the point of attack. And if you can do that, bringing in Lynn and Eric Henderson, like this group can take strides in 2024. There's no doubt in my mind.
And Isaiah Reichs was kind of the perfect guy you're kind of looking for. It's like when you're looking at what they needed to do on that interior line, they needed guys to complement kind of what a Bear Alexander likes to do. Bear Alexander, he does shoot gaps. He gets in the backfield. He takes guys on one-on-one and wins a lot. You don't want to strip that out of his game, I don't think. He's good at it. He makes a ton of plays. He rushes the passer well. So those high-impact plays are important. You don't want to necessarily go from top 25 and giving up 10 yards, like giving up 3 yards and making no plays, because making those plays, I mean, those kill drives. Those are how you play good defense. But again, you need a handful of guys like an Isaiah Rakes who will sit in a double, do what he does. I mean, he's not a guy, you look at his Texas A&M stats, they definitely don't wow you. But if you watch them play, you're just like, okay, this is exactly what they need. They need a guy who will sit in that one tech, sit in that middle, and just be really hard to move. And I think that'll help Bear Alexander play better. I think it'll help their linebackers play better. And it should overall, again, he's not adding a ton of production, but I think he'll be a big part. And if they get that yards per carry down, he'll be a huge part of that.
We said that when Isaiah Rakes committed to USC. It's like, this is not a guy that's going to come in and give you 20 TFLs and 15 sacks. He's not going to be a stat sheet stuffer, but he's going to allow a lot of other guys to play better football. And you mentioned it best. I think Bear Alexander and Isaiah Rakes are like the perfect combination on the inside, where you talk about a guy like Bear who wants to get penetration, wants to get in the backfield, really is phenomenal at doing it. Then you pair him up with a guy in Rakes who's just going to sit there in the middle and kind of be a plugger. I think that's a perfect combination. Now, continuing to look at that interior defensive line, I personally think they got to add some more depth. Like in that second transfer portal window, because you have a guy like Elijah Hughes who I think we're excited about. Would love to hear some USC fans in terms of other guys that you're excited about stepping up. But you look at all the top defensive lines and defensive units in the country. I mean, what made Michigan so special is the depth that they had. They had 4, 5, 6 guys on the inside that they would continue to rotate throughout 4 quarters of a game and 15 games of a season. I think USC, you're looking at and saying, okay, I like what we have with Bear and Isaiah, but is Elijah Hughes going to be ready? If he puts on some weight, he's a guy I think can be ready. Who else is going to be in that rotation? Wouldn't be surprised if USC goes back to the portal in that second window and grabs maybe 1 or 2 more guys to add to that rotation on that inside of that defense.
Because they needed another guy to play the Isaiah Rakes kind of position where it's not going to be about tackles. It's not going to be about production. I think you have a guy in Elijah Hughes that, again, I think he'd be kind of ready to do that now. It's like you watch that Louisville game, good off the pass rush, really good using his hands, great first step. In that ability to, if he gets a one-on-one matchup, he'll have a good chance of winning it. But again, that's why you kind of talk. His development will be about putting on 20 pounds, because it doesn't matter if you can win your one-on-ones. If when you get your double team, you're not really going to put yourself in any sort of position to be competitive in that situation. And if you can't compete in it, that's how you kind of look like USC maybe did last time, where again, you're getting blown off the ball and you're getting too many yards on a very simple kind of power play or a zone read where you just, if you can't stand it up, then you can't really defend it. So again, I think they could add one more guy. I know you're kind of talking about that kid from San Jose State who just hit. Like that type of addition, I think would really go a long way in making.
For USC fans, San Jose State, all conference defensive lineman on the inside just hit the portal from California. We might have to do a separate conversation on that. Would love to see USC make a play. I mean, they wanted to add, I think, another guy on the inside, right? They went after a guy like Jamar Caldwell. I would expect them to, whether it's, I mean, the transfer portal ain't going to stop. Like, there's going to be guys just cycling in. Obviously, there's another window that opens, but for graduates, they're coming in all the time. Would love to see USC continue to kick the tires on some guys on the inside. And Dill, you get to that edge rusher position in one. I mean, I'm excited to see what Dan Lynn and Eric Henderson do with this group. Like going back and watching some UCLA film and just getting a sense of how they like to play defense. They move these guys around a lot. They have them do a lot of different things. And Dill, like this USC edge room, it's loaded, right? Jamil Muhammad coming back, he really flashed. And if he can get a little bit more of that consistency, and I think he's an all-conference pass rusher. Anthony Lucas should have just been playing more. Anthony Lucas was so weird. You heard like just so many stories about him being the guy in spring ball last year and the guy in fall camp, and then it gets to the season and he doesn't really play that much. Then you have a guy like Braylon Shelby, Sam Green, 2 guys who were true freshmen last year that I thought should have been playing a little bit more too. Really excited to see their development. You had a guy like Nate Clifton in the portal. You're suddenly looking at an edge group that's had a lot of guys that can get after the passer also be solid against the run and kind of do some different things. Really excited to see what Dan Lynn and Eric Henderson can do with a group that's full of kind of a versatile skill set and a lot of dynamic players.
I mean, especially because like you talk about their issues in the rushing it. Like you have two guys or a guy like Lucas who's not playing at all really on the edge last year, really big, really physical on that edge spot. Feels like a guy who should be good against the run, or at least tougher than what they kind of were against the run. And same thing with a guy like Clifton. You bring in another guy who's more of a heavy-handed, strong side defensive end who's very capable of standing up offensive tackles and beating tight ends. And you just didn't see enough of that from USC, obviously, last year. And that goes back to like rolling personnel. It's like I feel like you can roll two lines that are a little bit more complementary because obviously Shelby and Green are more of those wiry kind of edge.
You should check Shelby though. Shelby's put on some weight.
Yeah, no doubt they both will. Obviously, they were freshmen, but you got two guys who are, again, I just think like you play complementary ball. It's like you got Jamil Muhammad and Solomon Byrd out there last year, both kind of more pure edge rushers, and you do expose yourself to that run game a little bit if they just roll your personnel a little bit better. I think, especially given that they have more of a diverse set of skills in that room now. I'd like to think that would help clean up some.
I am very excited for this. And going back to kind of like what to backtrack for a second. Cam Fountain, true freshman. If there's a guy on the outside on that edge spot that I think plays a lot as a freshman, Cam Fountain, I think he's a guy that you're looking at. Dill, what to expect from this edge group? And one of the things I'm most excited about, and again, going back and watching Dan Lynn and these UCLA defenses last year, a guy like Latu, probably the best pure pass rusher in the entire country last year. He's a guy that, I mean, he knew his role when it was 1st and 10. And I'm not going to go try to get a sack. I'm going to keep my outside shoulder free, and I'm going to play the run game. And he's not the best run defender. His specialty is 100% getting after the passer, but he wasn't a liability. And he wasn't a guy that is trying to play for his stats. His stats came because he's an elite football player. But, Dill, I'm very excited to see this edge group kind of take on that persona of we're playing as a unit. We're not necessarily trying to stuff the stat sheet. We're trying to keep this this offense from moving the football on us. And so you're going to see a little bit more gap integrity. You're going to see more sound football. That's, I mean, probably what I'm most excited from this group. And I think they have the personnel to do it. Again, adding a guy on the inside, I think would be big for this USC program. But Dill, I mean, with Dan Lynn, Eric Henderson coming in, that's what you have to be most excited for if you're this USC program. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. That'll do it, Dill. Next week, offensive skill, probably 30 minutes. Very excited to get into that one. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys again. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.